Analogue horror. It's one of my favorite internet horror genres. It lends itself to so many unique creators and voices. You can make an analog horror series about just about anything really, and that combined with its very passionate community has led to several series that brought intense amounts of backlash and drama. But did these really deserve their toxic reputation? And why is it so common for the analog horror space to produce these super controversial series? Let's find out by going over the story behind 5 of the all-time most infamous analog horror series. Urban Spooks the Painter. It makes sense to start with this one, since this is probably the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the title Infamous Analog Horror Series. Yet it also has one of the most interesting stories, with opinions on the series, the creator themselves, and what it represents overall, changing several times throughout its 3-year, 10-episode run. The Painter's first episode was intended to be a standalone thing, with Urban Spook only deciding to continue it as a series after it unexpectedly went viral in the analog horror space. This and the following episodes used to have analog horror in their titles, but that was later removed for reasons that will be very important later. Despite making what's probably one of the most well-known series in the genre, Urban himself is a complete outsider to the analog horror space. He instead has his roots in horror-themed art and music, with him apparently never even seeing a single episode of any analog horror ever. And he only made this series to try out his VHS digitizing hardware he had. I think that's a big reason why The Painter instantly blew up like it did, as in a genre that's defined so much by its reoccurring cliches, The Painter stands as something that is, for better or worse, quite unique. The first entry establishes the structure most preceding episodes will follow, with each one being framed as an eternal police tape, I think, documenting their investigation into the titular Painter, a serial killer that leaves abstract paintings depicting their victims at the scene of their crimes. And that's it for lore really. It's a very basic concept, and how that's portrayed is even more simplistic, each episode essentially just being a bunch of white text on a black background. But that's not why this series got as big as it did. In my mind, there are 2 reasons it took off. First, the biggest is of course the paintings themselves, which even the biggest haters of The Painter have to admit are really cool, and are clearly the main focus of it, at least for the first half of the series, with everything else feeling like an excuse to show them off. The second is the comparatively, for analog horror, grounded concept, just being about a human serial killer instead of a spooky monster or cosmic threat like we're so used to seeing. In the comments of the early uploads, you can see these opinions reflected, with a lot of very strong, widespread praise. Many of the top comments calling it genuinely disturbing, and there's multiple people calling it outright the best analog horror ever made. As I said, the overwhelming positive response and popularity led to Urban continuing to produce new episodes in the series. But as they went on, slowly the reception started to shift more critical. The primary complaints were that the series felt like nothing more than a series of gory death descriptions and a painting at the end over and over, without any real progressing narrative or developed characters to speak of. And also that the series' logic kind of fell apart if you stopped to think about it. Like, if this is supposedly archived police reports, why do they use such informal language and add in like spooky music and sound effects? Or probably the funniest example, there's one kill where the killer sneaks into someone's apartment by climbing up their drainpipe and kills them by completely encasing them in a like ginormous pile of wax. Like, how the hell did they sneak that in there? Did they bring a forklift with them? These nitpicky complaints with the series' quality boiling over into a full-blown controversy with the publication of the third and undoubtedly most infamous entry of the series, entitled In the Walls. Back in episode 1, one of the killer's paintings we were shown that looked particularly striking was this one, entitled Fuck Toy Corey. And this third episode reveals what it was meant to depict, using the usual absurdly graphic and detailed text, revealing it is a painting of one Corey Beck. The video describing how the painter had tortured him and his twin sister Margaret in absurdly cruel ways, forcibly shoving a brick with the phrase meat written on it down Margaret's throat, and describing how Corey's, quote, genitalia had been removed by pulling force. This edgy gore is pretty much the status quo for the series, but the reason this one in particular spawned so much backlash is that the victims here, Corey and Margaret, are 11 years old, and the painting is called Fuck Toy Corey. So, yeah. After this, criticizing Urban Spook really felt like a community event, where the entire Analogue Horror community came together to shit on Urban for this episode and the series as a whole. I mean, the painter is fairly popular for an Analogue Horror series, but that doesn't hold a candle to the freaking industrial industry of videos criticizing it that spawned after this. Urban himself would often respond to these critiques in Reddit threads and comment sections. His responses would vary from understanding and respectful to sometimes more, seething cope, to be honest. Most famously, after this Twitter thread asking, "What's an Analogue Horror opinion that will get you like this?" saw a response from the beloved horror tuber Pastara saying, "We need to stop praising series that rely entirely on shock value to carry the horror. Stuff like Urban Spook drives me nuts, because the only horror it has relies entirely on trying to describe the most vile thing possible with little else. Not only is it just lazy, but it also encourages other creators to attempt to make work similar to it, which just leads to more lazy and distasteful projects being created." It's certainly blunt criticism, but I don't think this feels particularly unfair or mean from Pastara. So how did Urban react to it? "You are such a fucking pussy. Just because extreme horror doesn't fit into your little autistic furry horror taste doesn't mean there isn't a place for it. Use your platform to talk about things you like instead of shitting on actual creators. Cunt." This response would obviously get ratioed very hard before being deleted. Notably, Martin Walls, creator of the Watton Files, shared a meme about him, and the funniest was probably the Chess Kids archive account, which is supposed to be an in-character profile, breaking character for one and only time just to reply, "Go fuck yourself, honestly." And after this, the snowball only grew, with several other minor controversies coming up. Urban faced a lot of criticism over selling merch of the Fuck Toy Cory painting, people saying it was insanely distasteful to make merch of a fictional SA murder victim minor. Urban defended this in a Reddit comment saying, "To everyone bitching about the Fuck Toy Cory shirt, I've been selling those shirts since way before I made the series. The series is a way for me to promote my artwork, and the art was made before, without a series in mind." Then, this comment itself also spawned another controversy, with people saying the whole series was nothing more than a way for Urban to promote his art. But honestly, I really don't think that's the case. Maybe at the start, but he clearly does put a ton of effort into the painter, especially the later episodes as we'll see soon. But yeah, the point is, Urban Spook became like the #1 villain of the internet horror space for a while. In fact, the sheer wealth of discourse got so bad, discussion on him was banned from r/Analogue Horror for a time. Yet despite all this, Urban simply continued making the series the same he ever had. I will say from episode 4 to 8, it really feels like he's desperately trying to top himself and how edgy and over the top he can make the kills, and it does start to become a bit obnoxious and not even slightly scary very quickly. But there are positives that shine through in spite of that. Obviously the cool paintings and music he makes are all great as always. It speaks to Urban's ambition that he incorporates new shit like voice acting in episode 7 and this really cool animated section in episode 8. And there is somewhat of a mystery storyline established. Kind of. Basically in episode 2 we learn the painter killed the family of a police officer named Bill Collins, but his body was never found. Then in episode 4, another murdered cop uses his blood to write the number 2 on the wall, which people quickly realized meant there were 2 killers. And a hidden message in episode 6 confirms that second killer is in fact Bill Collins. So, with episodes coming out relatively consistently, when there was an over 1-year gap in uploads after episode 8, many were wondering if the criticism got too much for him and Urban had decided to abandon the series. Only for him to return by doing the most unexpected thing ever, drop an episode that was actually amazing. Titled Hell, episode 9 finally breaks the monotonous copy-paste format of every other episode. Mostly. I might have overstated it a little. But there is an undeniable huge improvement visible in this one, primarily because instead of just relying on white text on a black screen, we get this very cool footage of inside the killer's hideout. The censored views of bodies and the like does actually set a pretty unnerving mood. Then the Giga Chad investigating their hideout, Nathan Cole, finds a lead here and instantly rushes to an apartment where the killers are in the process of one of their trademark wacky torture routines, instantly gunning down Bill Collins and capturing the titular painter, revealed to be this chick named Mona Linnaeus. But this whole ending sequence is genuinely really awesome. The 3D animated realistic body cam footage just looks sick. I love how creepy the killers move, especially Mona just standing still like a statue, as her victim's screams play all throughout this section, and even after it. I did find this scene sticking in my mind long after watching, which I consider a hallmark of some genuinely effective, brutal horror. And after this part came out, you did see a lot of people giving Urban Spook props for actually taking on board the criticism and making something pretty great. I think for online communities, people can find it fun to have a fill-in to hate on it, but there really is nothing better than seeing someone improve, and people were very happy and hopeful to see this continue with the 10th and final episode set to come out soon after. We did end up having to wait another whole year for the finale, but when it dropped, well, it was something. Simply titled The Painter. How would this wrap up the roller coaster that was this whole series? Will it give answers to why Mona did what she did, explain the plot inconsistencies?
My pussy, fuck yeah, I shoved a grenade up in there. Too bad the guards are even more perverted than I am. Would have gotten away with it. Wouldn't that be something? Big pussy, boom.
Yes and no. The majority of this one is focused on an interview with Mona after being arrested. There are some parts that come off as extremely tryhard and funny in a way I don't think was intentional.
Did you know the convulsions of dying people makes for great vibrators? You've been given the death sentence.
The stuff I do like is Mona talking about her brother-like bond with Bill, but then both growing up at an orphanage. I get a small bit of wistful nostalgia in Mona's recounting of it. That lends a slight amount of humanity to them. It's kind of unfortunate that this comes at the very end of the series, but I do honestly really like her characterization.
There was a sundown once. You know, one of them really red ones. I remember he pointed at it and said, "That's where the devil is." Then he took my hand and we ran towards it, like two kids in the devil's backyard. Did we ever catch up? Damn, you tell me.
We get vague hints at there being some kind of government-operated machine that makes a sound underground, which Mona hears and causes her to connect with the Red Man, who apparently is some kind of, I guess, demonic force that is the one who makes the paintings and chooses her victims. Mona outright saying the police let her get away with everything and she was actually trying to get caught. It's just bluntly stated, which honestly, even though it does technically justify some of the inconsistencies throughout the series, it comes so out of nowhere without any previous hints to it. It kind of feels like it was just thrown in here to hand-wave everything. Overall, it's obviously going for a very vague, open-ended finale, which does allow you to infer an interesting story through Mona as a potentially unreliable narrator. Like, I personally feel like this Red Man entity is something the government is aware of, and through those machines somehow manages to use Mona as a vessel to contain it. Maybe the hundreds of murders she committed is preferable to allowing it to run free across the country. After the interview ends, we're informed Mona was stabbed to death her first day in prison, which a lot of people in the comments pointed out is a really cool, fitting end for her. A killer so famous for murdering people in the most Looney Tunes ass, over-the-top, elaborate ways possible to meet her end by simply getting unceremoniously stabbed off-screen. And then in its final twist, it's revealed Mona was telling the truth, as after her death, hundreds of other painters spawn across America, presumably killing like tens of thousands and leaving behind the very same style paintings she did, even signed with Mona's exact handwriting. The series ending, quite fittingly, with a giant montage of these paintings set to some crazy metal music. Ending on the painting Self-Portrait from episode 1, which we now know to have never been of Mona, but rather a portrait of the true evil behind everything, the Red Man. Okay, I'm not sure how hot a take this is, but the more I write and think about this finale, the more I like it. To be honest, the last two episodes are actually pretty awesome. I really appreciate how Urban leans harder into his edgy style, despite the criticism, and you really do have to respect the ambition seen here compared to where the series started. I will say the ending with the metal music and the crazy paintings definitely isn't bone-chillingly scary or anything. It almost feels very campy. Actually, wait, is the painter even meant to be like a horror? I mentioned at the start how Urban removed the phrase Analogue Horror from all the titles in the series, and that makes sense because this isn't really an analog horror in the traditional sense. I feel the genre is heavily defined by its world building and ongoing ARG adjacent mysteries, but the painter has next to none of that. And analog horror always prefers more subtle, soul-building atmospheric horror, whereas the painter is as in-your-face, gory, edge, as it gets, to the point of being comical. Almost like that's being done on purpose. Urban Spook did a Reddit AMA in between the release of the final 2 episodes, and what he says there is quite illuminating. I had no idea what Analogue Horror was before I made the first video. The only thing I knew was it had a VHS aesthetic, and the reason I made the first video was to try out my new VHS compression setup. I just decided to call it Analogue Horror since I knew it was a thing. In hindsight, my content is not really what other Analogue Horror seems to be, but I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be different types of Analogue Horror, if that makes sense. He says he was inspired by splatter movies and exploitation cinema from the 70s and 80s, with him likening The Painter to those 2000s torture porn movies, which I think is pretty apt. I feel like people take the series way more serious than it's intended. I try to balance the scary with funny, which can be hard, but for me, it's way too over the top to be offensive. Hearing how Urban sees the series reframes a lot of what I previously perceived as technical shortcomings as his artistic voice. Now, I don't think this magically makes the series objectively great, and it absolutely fails as an Analogue Horror. But looking at it as a tongue-in-cheek, purposefully over-the-top, campy torture porn thing, yeah, I'd say it does that pretty well. As for the controversies Urban found himself in, I do personally think the whole fuck toy Corey fiasco does hold merit as being undeniably a bit distasteful and gross, and I believe it fails to be either funny or scary. I think it's the one time it does go too far, but I also don't feel like making something too edgy is a good reason to actively hate on someone years later. However, I do feel like if you're going to make that and then lean into the whole edgelord persona yeah, deal with it you autistic furries, I have no limits and I'll make worse. You can't then turn around and have a meltdown when people criticize you for it. Well, I mean you can, but it's a little cringe. Although that's it for substantial criticisms, really. He was kinda cringed at one time almost 3 years ago, and his series doesn't fit the taste of the Analogue Horror community. Really not that bad. And with how much the series improved, I think for the most part, people have cooled off on hating on the painter and Urban himself. Which is nice because from what I read in that AMA, he really doesn't seem like a bad guy or anything, and comes off as pretty friendly and humble. It also helps that the painter doesn't even hold the true title of the most infamous Analogue Horror nowadays either, as we've had much worse big series to compare it to since then, as you'll see throughout this video. Nexpo is a YouTuber who decided to make a series, a Analogue Horror series, and he called it Liminal Land. Okay, enough of that. Yes, Liminal Land. It's weird how relatively obscure this one is, considering it's made by 2 of the absolute biggest creators in the horror YouTube analysis whatever niche, Nexpo and Nick Crowley. Because of that, you might find it weird to see 2 huge, largely liked figures showing up in a video like this. I mean, how bad could this Liminal Land be? Well, oh boy, it's certainly something. I guess we'll start with the series itself. The main thing that strikes me is that it's, quite pedestrian. The whole thing very much feels like a mix of trendy Analogue Horror-y stuff, even down to the title. Like Liminal Land? Seriously? An evil theme park from the 70s named themselves after a 2020's internet horror buzzword? But whatever. The first episode is pretty simple, the whole thing being an opening on the US national anthem, because Local 58 did it I guess, and then a bunch of black and white missing person posters. Another quite played out cliche that doesn't provide anything other than establishing people are going missing for some reason. But it is just the first episode, and Analogue Horror usually starts out basic like this, to set the mood, you know? I'm sure the second one will get off the ground and... Oh no. Yeah, this whole series is filled with AI slop. There's a lot to say about this and everything else surrounding the project, but for now, let's quickly run through the episodes themselves. Episode 2 is also reheating Analogue Horror brand nachos, doing the instructional employee tape thing like FNAF VHS and so many others. Only it's teaching you to spot dissatisfied visitors in these AI-generated smears that don't even fit what the text is describing. Like you're supposed to spot the dissatisfied person, but in some images, I guess they had trouble prompting so there's only one person, and in others they all look like they're melting when there's only supposed to be one that looks off. And it doesn't feel like it's done intentionally because it is true for all but one of them shown. Anyway, the third episode is a bunch of urban spook style text on a black background, describing and showing people that got deformed by riding rides in the park. Oh yeah, that's what this series is supposed to be about, by the way. An anomaly theme park named Liminal Land that I guess turns people into AI homunculuses. The fourth episode is a huge step up actually, well, after you get past the opening of totally uncanny AI generated images, as it transitions into a long animated segment of someone walking through Liminal Land. They actually hired someone to animate this one, and they did a very good job technically speaking, although this is yet another case of kind of ripping off another more popular series, this time obviously being a copy-paste of Backrooms. The final episode is actually an original concept, I think, and easily the best of this short-lived series. It recounts a mom who brings her daughter into Liminal Land as a sacrifice to some kind of monster presumably, but the way they tell it through these little kid drawings is actually pretty creative. I assume was handmade and is a little spooky. But yeah, that's the entire series. I do obviously have a bias against it for the AI, and as someone who's seen a lot of analog horror, I find the reuse of the most basic ass tropes and blatant ripping off of other series more annoying than most would, but I do have to give props to Nexpo and Nick for actually improving near the end, even if it feels really out of nowhere and clearly is not intended as a finale. So why did they abandon the series so quick? From its very inception, Liminal Land was coated in controversy and accusations. One of the biggest were people calling the whole thing a lazy cash grab. This primarily comes from the website, despite how it's supposed to be an in-universe ARG lore thing, having its landing page set as a storefront full of a bunch of perceived to be overpriced merch for a series that literally just came out, like we're fucking Poppy's Playtime or something. This was presumably, due to the criticism, changed to not be the first thing you see when clicking on the site, and if you visit it today, the merch page is straight up removed. This would be linked in every episode's description, along with a Ko-Fi page, which has literally one donation, so I can't imagine this series was particularly profitable for them, which is probably the most realistic reason it ended so quick. When you sifted past the merch page to see the ARG on the site, it was just an insane gallery of even more ugly AI images alongside some lore write-ups, leading to the other very obvious major criticism being the use of AI in place of doing the imagery themselves or hiring an artist. There are two main defenses people seem to give for this. First, that the AI was used to give a uncanny vibe to the images. But, I mean, a human can make something uncanny just fine, and it's done so far better as we've seen in countless other analog horror series. And second is that this came out in 2023, before AI was a problem, apparently. But that just isn't quite true. You can find the majority of comments from when the series started are complaining about the AI use. At least on Twitter, the actual videos have much more sparse criticism, although part of me wonders if that's because throughout every arm of this project, there is zero disclosure that it uses AI anywhere. Even if the concerns about its environmental damage weren't as widely discussed back then, it is still obviously very ugly and not in an intentional way, and replacing what should be done by a real artist. Since, you know, combined close to 7 million subscriber Nexpo and Nick Crowley are not hurting for funds to hire artists for the series that they seemingly created with the main drive of hawking overpriced t-shirts and hoodies for. I think that is the biggest pain point with this series, the use of AI instead of real artists, huge focus on merch and donations before anything to do with its story, and blatant ripping off of other series. It just makes the entire thing feel very cynical. Like the main focus was how profitable the series would be instead of how good it could be. Which I feel goes against the independent creative spirit of analog horror, with the vast majority of even popular creators seeing little to no financial gain for their work, and reinvesting what little they do get into improving the series through using that to work with other people as it grows. I don't know if that's being too uncharitable, but it is the honest initial feeling I have going through all this. You might feel different, but yeah. All that said, even though I really don't like this series, I do give some leeway to the creators themselves, at least as far as the use of AI goes. As while a lot of their fan bases were aware of its negative effects and how disliked it is more than possible Nexpo and Nick were not. And they did use it less as the series went on. That, along with the abandonment of the series itself, I think shows they are aware the whole thing was kind of a mistake. As for how everything ended up, it was announced the series was going on a hiatus, which it obviously would never return from, and was seemingly just swept under the rug. As far as I could find, neither creator has ever defended themselves, apologized, or even mentioned it at all since then. And I think the vast majority of the internet and their fan bases has forgotten this even existed, which really is probably for the best. I would consider the original FNAF VHS to be in the top 3 most important and influential series to ever grace the analog horror genre. It single-handedly established so many tropes we'd see reused over and over, as well as creating the whole FNAF analog horror subgenre that has become arguably just as popular as analog horror itself. So, needless to say, it is quite an exceptional piece that I'd say still holds up surprisingly well today, and is another one I covered in detail in my State of Analog Horror Analysis video essay thingy last year. The interesting thing is this is a unique case in this video where the controversy does not come from the videos themselves, but rather its creator and all the other crazy fandom shit that surrounds it. So to start off, 1 year after Squimpus finished up his original series, another analog horror creator and fan of Squimpus named Baddington launched a full-on remake of the series. Baddington's version uses this really impressive 3D animation and these awesome looking, more realistic mascot-y designs for the animatronics. And overall, these are largely faithful remakes, mostly just changing the visuals with very slight differences you may or may not find as improvements. Overall, I do prefer the minimal approach in the originals for the most part, especially the static drawings in the Pirate Cove pre-show, since in that context they are unique and believable for the time period, whereas in Baddington's version they are, albeit really nice looking 3D animation, the same as every other episode. But there are other scenes that are huge upgrades, and best of all, the original segments added throughout, which become more plentiful as the remake project goes on, each episode being a marked improvement over the last. So by the time we get to the end, I'm sure it'll probably far exceed the oh, never mind. Yeah, so this is where the controversy comes in. This remake project was being made with the full blessing of Squimpus, which, as someone who was obviously heavily inspired by him, probably meant a lot to Baddington. But when the remake project was about halfway done, he made a joke rest in peace tweet for the creator of the Walton Files, Martin Walls. This caused a ton of backlash, since apparently people thought this was genuine. Baddington would post another tweet revealing it was a joke just a few minutes later. In all seriousness, this was a prank, bit of a way to show that Martin Walls really is an inspiration, and how me and others really miss him since he's been offline. Wanted to show that without him, there'd be no light in this darkness. Love you, fartin' balls. Martin himself would speak on it, seeming a bit disappointed and concerned over the backlash it had caused, and most importantly, Squimpus McGrimpus themselves would reply to Baddington's tweet, revoking his blessing for him to continue with the remake project. And soon after, Baddington would make a full response/apology over the whole fiasco. That did come off as very genuine and fair without any excuses. So although this was a way bigger controversy in the moment than I really think it should have been, the community unanimously forgave him, and he has since grown a ton as a creator, continuing to make better and better videos, truly establishing himself as a GOAT of the FNAF VHS scene in his own right. But it was still a little disappointing to see the remake project cancelled. But I guess we always have the originals to watch. It's not like there's any big reason people might never want to watch those again. Yeah. On St. Patrick's Day of 2023, an account under the name Burner Account 50250 pop up showing definitive proof of McGrimpus grooming someone 4 years younger than they were, Squimpus being 20 while the victim was 16. The allegations extend as far as them sharing and discussing what's described as fetish art, and Squimpus themselves calls it that, and admits it was grooming in his initial confession post on Discord. This was revealed through a very funnily edited Twitter video. And a now inaccessible Google Doc. And the very next day, Squimpus would make a thread admitting to it all being true before leaving the internet. They do allude to wanting to come back when they've improved, but the comments and general sentiment in the community seems to not want to ever see a return. And with this event, a large swath of the community also feels their VHS series is also now infected by the person who made it, to the point they no longer want to watch it, which makes the cancellation of the remake sting all the more. However, it's not all entirely bad. There was another remake project started up by Phalox, which utilized the movie designs. Although that too was not fully completed, only extending to the first season, which is about the first half. Meanwhile, Baddington did actually return to doing the remakes, but he spun it off into his own very distinct thing. Although that is pretty incredible in its own right, especially the Fazbear's Fright episode, where it's like an actual haunted ride thing. That shit was so cool. But yeah, as far as the original goes, I think it is a huge, unfortunate black mark that is more than enough of a reason for it to earn its place in this video. 12man is a FNAF VHS creator, and he's been doing this shit for over 5 years, with by far the most famous and infamous being the culmination of all his work so far, the ongoing Junior's Archive series. Its first entry, Medical Imaging, sets up the basic plot and displays its consistent, and what I think is pretty remarkable, quality. The whole thing is an alternate retelling of FNAF, as you'd expect, with a specific focus on the actions of 12man's own, far more brutal version of William Afton. And the first episode is, in my opinion, the best, with the inciting incident being that William is spiking Fazbear's pizzas with genetically modified tapeworms to kill kids. Yeah. The way we are shown this is from the perspective of a doctor explaining the kid-killing worm pandemic to a nurse, which he is recording for evidence. A nice justification for why this is being recorded, letting us see it, as well as a natural way to exposition dump on the audience without relying on the usual plain text format we see in so many other series. The whole scene is a pretty awesome intro actually. The voice acting and punchy sound design is a particular standout.
What the fuck? Please, doctor, excuse my foul mouth, but Jesus, what the hell is this?
That is cystic echinocosis.
Cystic echinococosis? How?
After this, the doctor gets called in to perform emergency surgery on another small kid who's been affected by William's worms. In what is easily the hardest to watch part of the whole series, it is legitimately very sad and effective. We don't see anything, instead letting us hear the kids crying and the doctors frantically trying and failing to save him. A genuinely amazing first episode that really hooks you in. The second one you could call a bit more filler. I mean, it is pretty good, but not necessary to go over for the purposes of this video, and I see no reason to spoil more than is necessary, as the real juicy shit happens in the third, and as of now, most recent episode of the series, entitled Freddy's Junior Origins Part 1. This one's a huge step up in ambition. It's almost as long as this video, showcasing its awesome use of 3D mocap animation, which makes the series so much more unique and immersive, used in these really long dialogue scenes. Overall, they are very visually impressive and I like the voice acting, but sometimes it's a little long-winded and clunky. Like, did you really need to put this in there?
I found a huge collection of old VHS tapes, being only 25 cents per tape. And according to the seller, most of them were just old movies and TV shows, but there was one that had caught my eye, and that one was the rare Star Wars 1992 Fox release VHS tape.
Now, since the owner was not selling the tapes separately, and out of pure self-indulgence and nostalgia, and because I was a huge Star Wars fan when I was a child, I bought all the tapes for 25 cents per tape.
And when I got home, and after watching the Star Wars tape, I went on to browse through the rest of the tapes because, again, curiosity will kill the fucking cat eventually. And, I enjoyed them, they're fine, but when I finished checking out all of them, and I decided to digitize them all and archive them for, purposes for the Internet Archive and anything to do with YouTube and just video essays on stuff that's, lost media.
There is also the issue of some scenes being obviously not being recorded in world, so why are we seeing them? Like the establishing shots? Maybe this is an old head take, but I really hate when series break the rules of everything being recorded on a VHS. I think it makes it feel less like an Analogue Horror and hurts the immersion. But those are admittedly quite nitpicky and far from anything someone would call offensive. No, for that we need to rewind to the very opening minutes of this episode. This sees a scene set within the pizzeria, where after some cool, unnerving security cam shots, William is heard entering, along with the sounds of a crying baby. Then the beeping and bubbling of a fucking deep fryer turning on. Yes, this is the series where William Afton deep fries a baby. This would obviously cause quite a stir in the internet horror community, garnering a lot of intense criticism, primarily on, TikTok. Whoever made this shit isn't any better than William Afton himself. Yeah, whoever made this for sure needs to get their hard drive checked. I just think it's really weird for somebody to think of something like this and go, yeah, I want to make content with a baby getting tortured. Maybe I'm too woke, but this just doesn't sit right with me. FNAF VHS creators have a weird fetish with kids dying. There are a lot of comments in this vein, a lot criticizing the scene for being uncomfortable and distasteful, with others, as you saw, insinuating the creator is some kind of nefarious figure or creep himself. And those are some of the top comments, so I'm not cherry picking here. I am going to give the benefit of the doubt that these are being made by younger users, since this is TikTok. I mean, I hope so, since I feel it's pretty crazy to insinuate that 12man needs to have his hard drive checked over a scene in an internet horror video, even if it's one that relies on pretty extreme shock value. 12man himself will respond to these comments in this very long post on his channel. He opens by pointing out the purpose of the scene was meant to be shocking and cruel to make you hate William, revealing that the entire thing is just 2 stock sounds from YouTube, and pointing out he does not show any of the act. It's intent amplified, he says, by forcing you to imagine what's happening and having the camera instead show the animatronics shaking in fear, unable to move. Which, yeah, that part is pretty genius and works very well. Oh, and he reveals it's not actually a baby, but a kid. I guess that makes it a bit better. And he then denies that it is shock value, and claims there is a logical reason for William deep frying them. I mean, I watched this thing multiple times, and I just cannot fathom a single reason why he needs to deep fry them. In the phone call, William alludes to a client. But like, what possible reason could that client want them deep fried? Like, are they going to eat them? Because they'd be cold by the time they got to them, right? Anyway, he obviously denies the erroneous accusations the comments made earlier. This scene is not a product of my hidden fantasies or fetishes. Whoever keeps making this up and sharing this disgusting assumption, I question your mental health, buddy. Really, it's slandering me as a person at this point. He ends the message saying the only thing you'd find in his hard drive is half-naked pictures of Principal Celestia, saying the newfound popularity is motivating him to complete part 2, and attaching this purple guy Jeffrey Epstein picture. Now, outside of the toxic playpen of TikTok, you will find more substantive criticism of the series. Primarily, people claim it's poorly written and reliant on shock value, saying that since the series is supposed to be a gritty, realistic take on FNAF, stuff like William genetically engineering killer worms and the obvious deep frying comes off as more comical and immersion breaking, as well as more granular stuff like it having poor pacing and 4 FNAF series barely featuring the animatronics. To give my own opinion, I really enjoyed this series, but do relent this criticism is mostly fair. Although I really do not think it's fair to call it straight up bad or poorly written overall. I believe it's simply going for something that these people don't like, because of its shock value nature. Which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. My favorite book is American Psycho, and that has scenes way more descriptive and gross than anything here, but it works for the kind of story it's trying to tell. Now, I'm obviously not saying these are of the same quality, but I think the shock value in 12man series similarly does support the story they're trying to tell. As he said, the point is to get you to be disgusted and want to see William get brought to justice, as he continually manages to weasel his way out of punishment, which is the main focus of the story so far, as well as to simply be unsettling. And I think overall this series is achieving those goals very well, along with having some of the most impressive production value of any analog horror series I've come across. So yeah, it's not going to be something that's for everyone, but if you only know about this as the series where William deep fries a baby, I'd encourage you to give it a chance because I think you'll be surprised by how good it actually is. Imagine a time in the not too distant future where, due to our constant abuse and exploitation of resources, humanity is left at the brink of extinction, and in that desperation, the entire world resorts to prayer, begging for divine intervention to save us from the consequences of our own greed. And in response, an angel descends upon us. Yet instead of humbly embracing this divine intervention, we capture that angel, and just like we did to everything else, abuse it as another source of energy we can siphon off like parasites. That is the basic pitch of one of the most popular contemporary analog horror series, Angel Engine. Sounds pretty cool, huh? Now let me walk you through how this series completely squanders any and all potential such a unique concept offers. First, and most infamously, this is another series that relies on AI-generated slop. Only this time, it's practically everything. First off, it is just so absurdly lacking in any self-awareness to make it serious with such heavy environmentalist messages like this about humanity's abuse of resources, then use a freaking AI to make it. At first, I assumed that may have been intentional as like a criticism of AI itself in some meta sense, even though that itself would be kind of stupid. But no, it's just because the guy who makes this is an unironic AI bro. Even ignoring any moral implications or the general distaste for it, the fact this series uses AI just does nothing but harm the story it's trying to tell and mood it's going for, which is like the two biggest things analog horror is good at. Because the creator has to rely on AI for all the imagery, it is legitimately impossible to tell what's being shown a lot of the time. Movements can be incomprehensible, character designs are completely inconsistent from episode to episode, and even scene to scene. Like, here we're being told the angel is going to revive this guy, but the visuals show him being revived and falling apart again over and over. Or probably the most comical, when the main antagonist gets killed in episode 10, his eulogy poster looks like one of those freaking AI Studio Ghibli images that's like piss yellow. And the AI made an error where his date of death is listed as 3030 instead of 2030. Making fans think he was supposed to be 1,000 years old, and for some reason the creator just left it like that to this day instead of re-uploading it. I also have to question how you don't realize this in editing, and how much effort you're putting into the series if you're going as far as to AI generate freaking text. Things are far worsened by the way the story is told. You see, another unique thing this series has, and I suspect the main reason it became as popular as it did in the first place, despite its questionable quality,
Save me?
No.
is that it's a TikTok series. Because of this, episodes are basically a series of very stilted, disconnected, short scenes, likely because of the limits of an AI video model only being able to do 10-second or so little clips, and obviously gives zero room for any kind of build-up or payoff. To give a clear example, the very first episode has the messenger list how to capture an angel, I guess. He talks in that list format. The use of AI also makes the story unclear. Like when it's supposed to be showing us using the planet's resources, it's these creepy red-eyed shadow figures in a burning forest. When you watch this, you'll likely assume these are like an army of demons or something. But no, it's just supposed to be normal people who are burning down trees for some reason. For the part showing the whole world praying, there's this big angel monster thing. It looks the exact same as the corrupted angels we see throughout the series, but this character never appears anywhere else, so maybe it's supposed to be like a statue. But then why does it look so creepy and un-angel-like? It feels like the AI is being told to make everything analog horror-like, and maybe you think it looks kinda cool, but it makes zero sense in the world at this point in the story. That's a consistent problem throughout the series. It's all hype moments and aura that maybe you could think seems cool in isolation, but if you actually engage and think about it, trying to infer a story through these little details and visuals like every other good analog horror ever made does, it's a complete mess of contradictions. It's worst with the messenger itself, who sometimes looks like its mouth is missing, then it has a like cut opening in its jaw, then in some frames it's just a full-on normal mouth with like perfectly straight white teeth. It's unclear what its design is supposed to be, and that's another huge problem, as when characters with similar designs show up, it's legitimately impossible to tell who's who, and it just makes the whole series a headache to parse. Not helped by the questionable audio design. I mean, just listen to this, man.
Step 2. Exterminate the wildlife. Step 3. Watch your species fall into disarray.
That is not slowed down, it really talks like that. And yes, they are using fucking Lavender Town background music, which they will continue to use for a majority of the episodes here. Like, it's an okay creepy song, but Pokemon music obviously does not fit their post-apocalyptic biblical story they're going for, and it's just painfully generic and overplayed. And the majority of the episodes are just like this. The same really grating, slow AI voice, Lavender Town music, which combined with the visual sludge of disconnected imagery, just gets really grating really fast. As a last note on this episode, the messenger is telling us how to capture an angel, and they're supposed to be a future version of Jeff Ertzman, the series' main antagonist, who leads the project of capturing angels and using them for power through the titular Angel Engine, which in concept is kind of cool since it reframes the first episode. But looking back at it, it just makes no sense. Like, why is he talking to his past self in a top 5 list format? And he's telling him to drain the planet's resources, / make the world pray. But that makes no sense because he's just a random scientist, he can't cause that to happen. So you think maybe it's going to happen anyway, then why is he telling him past self to do it? I'm sorry if this sounds kind of confusing, but that is generally just how this series is. I'm harping on it a bit because I hear a lot of people say, oh, it's okay if Angel Engine uses AI, or it's a shame it does because it has such a good story. But like, no it doesn't. From top down, this series is fundamentally broken, and that is largely because it uses AI as a crutch for every single aspect, is restricted to the 60-second short-form content format, which just does not fit Analogue Horror at all. And obviously everything put together it does not lend itself to being in any way horrifying.
You want to know what I'm doing? I'm playing Block Blast is what I'm doing. Now be quiet, I'm trying to break my record.
Okay.
Download Block Blast today.
But moving away from the series itself, another common criticism is the idea Angel Engine is allegedly plagiarized from Dr. Nowhere, a quite beloved Analogue Horror creator best known for the Boiled One phenomenon. This theory comes from a singular Instagram story he posted discussing Angel Engine and AI infesting Analogue Horror in general. In it, Dr. Nowhere writes about being disheartened by how similar it is to a video concept he was working on around the same time. Also about the government siphoning energy from a fallen angel. He then points out how parts of Angel Engine seem strikingly similar to his own distinct art style. I might be being paranoid at this point, but it feels like the AI is being fed my art. The contours, the shapes, the eyes, that biomechanical element. Nothing I invented, but does that not look exactly like something I draw? I'm not gonna lie to you, I am kind of disturbed and discouraged. If a robot is already this close to being able to replicate the style I've been refining and building for the past 6 years here, I honestly don't know what to do. And I can't imagine how many other artists must feel seeing things like that. It's like an inhumanly sewn conjoined mutation of so many artists' children. Damn, that's pretty sad. Anyway, I do actually want to defend Angel Engine's creator unknowingly here. People use this to claim Angel Engine is plagiarized wholesale from Dr. Nowhere, but that isn't even what Nowhere himself said. He calls the idea being so similar an unintentional tragic coincidence. The AI copying Nowhere's style though, I do think holds some merit, at least to me. I mean, it just looks very similar, but it's probably from inertly just typing Analogue Horror style spooky mechanical angel into his prompt box, and the AI pulling from Nowhere's work by itself, since he's so popular. I still think it sucks, and that inherent plagiarism is a huge reason I'm so against Gen AI, but I at least don't think unertly maliciously singled out Dr. Nowhere's art style. Since Angel Engine's style constantly changes due to it being, as Nowhere so elegantly put it, an inhuman soon mutation of so many artists' children. To wrap this up, I was able to find archives of a response Unertly made on his own Instagram story, and Nowhere's response to that. Probably due to people who had misinterpreted Nowhere's post as accusing him, Unertly makes his post denying that he had stolen the concept of Angel Engine from Dr. Nowhere, showing proof he had ideas for it as far back as 2023. Then Nowhere responds, clearing up he did not accuse Unertly of stealing the idea from him. My disappointment was not that you stole anything intentionally, but that you used / continue to use AI as a shortcut to produce it, when my plan was to actually put a lot of work into the art and world of it. And regarding the actual art of it, I find it highly unlikely mine or other artists' work haven't been at least unintentionally fed into the AI. The issue is not you fleshing out a concept for yourself necessarily, it's using this easy way to get an extreme amount of popularity, and with those earnings, not hiring an actual artist, or better yet, learning yourself. I do feel it's only fair to mention there are people who actually like the AI visuals. They claim it lends the series an uncanny atmosphere, I guess because you can barely tell what's happening, even though that's clearly a limitation of the slop and not an artistic decision. And the main point you see them bring up is, so what? Do you expect one person to make a whole Analogue Horror series by themselves? Through like passion and hard work? Because it's not like we have countless other series that are far more ambitious than Angel Engine while being made without AI. But okay. Even if it is impossible for Unearthly to make this series within his own skill set, and he is incapable of learning for some reason, couldn't he just work with someone else? In fact, he did, as after the overwhelming backlash and arguments, Unearthly announced he was going to move away from AI and start using real artists as of episode 19. And it instantly looks way better. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say this magically makes the series good, as everything else is just as bad, but there is some legitimately cool imagery here, and it's the very first time in the series anything was actually slightly unnerving to me. But yeah, after all that complaining, it's cool to see the creator has the integrity to actually take on constructive criticism and work on improve, and he went back to using AI 2 episodes later. In this comment, Unearthly says he did this because it took too long, causing a lot of annoyance and frustration with people because he'd shown he can use real artists and everyone agreed it looked better, but he chooses to continue to wallow in the slop because it takes 4 weeks to make a new episode instead of 2. To my knowledge, the only time Knowingly has spoken about the series is a short text interview in that Wendigooner video. The most notable thing is, he claims no AI is involved in the writing or editing. My process usually works like this. I draft up a script, generate the images accordingly, download them, and cut them up into different layers in Photoshop. Then I put everything together in After Effects, make things move, add voices, music, and effects. He words this in such a way that it's like he's saying, oh no, I only use the AI for the images. Everything else is all me. Which even Wendigoon seems to think is the case in his video. But like, that's obviously not the case. Like, the voices are obviously AI. And the movement is most blatant of all. He edits insofar as he drags and drops the AI video and voices onto a timeline. I don't know why he feels the need to lie about such an obvious thing, to be honest. That's a common trend I always see with AI artists, where they act like it's a totally legitimate art form, but also simultaneously do everything in their power to downplay how much they rely on it. After that, he mentions the Angel Engine game, where he commissioned an indie studio to make it for him, so it has no AI, and claims he does not actually want to use AI, and that he would hire real artists if he got more Patreon money. I don't know about this, it's somewhat subjective, but he is already making seemingly quite a lot off his Patreon, especially considering how much work could possibly go into a practically completely AI generated 1-minute episode every 2 weeks. And he's shown before he does have the means to work with real artists and simply chooses not to because it takes too long. So maybe he means he wants like multiple so it doesn't slow it down, I guess? One of the most common defenses from Unearthly and any AI project really is that people will say, what, do you expect him to hire a whole fleet of artists and animators? He's just a normal guy. To be honest, I never got this argument because this is an analog horror series, a genre defined by independent, often quite young and inexperienced artists creating a lot with very little. That sense of ambition and creativity shining true in spite of their limitations is one of the biggest appeals and reasons I became a fan of this genre in the first place. I mean, look at any of the most popular series. Local 58's first episode is nothing but dashcam footage and a TTS voice. Or the Mandela catalog, something that Angel Engine obviously draws a lot of inspiration from. The early episodes there are nothing but a few JPEGs and the Photoshop liquify tool, but managed to capture an adoring audience of literally millions while also telling a far more cohesive and engaging story than Angel Engine. Although I obviously really do not like Angel Engine, I want to be clear I do not hold any ill will towards Unearthly themselves. He is making his own series the way he wants, with quality he finds acceptable, and it's really not his fault it got as popular as it did. That fault lies with the audience, as really that's who holds the power of influence in the analog horror and really any independent creative space. So if you are upset about Angel Engine's rise to popularity, I don't think spreading more negativity, especially to the creator, is in any way going to help that. I think the best thing to do is to go out, find, and give your time and support to the real handmade series out there you do like. And that's the video. This took way longer than I expected, but it was pretty fun. I'm happy with the mix of negative and mostly positive segments. I think that makes these kind of drama videos more fun, both to make and hopefully to watch. I hope I wasn't too mean in some of these, but I mean, making a bad analog horror isn't really that great a sin, so no hard feelings. And the next video is a series I'm very excited for and have been wanting to make since I started YouTube, with some internet horror / drama videos similar to this in between each part. So subscribe if you want to see those, And thanks for watching. Bye bye.